Hope everybody's doing all right this evening. Great to see everybody. We're going to pick up in the character unit where we left off. And just to remind everybody, if you don't have the book, feel free to use the PDF online on the Facebook page. There's a PDF that you can use to follow along, make notes, etc. And we're going to be picking up in chapter 5. In the last class, we talked about a little bit about our reputation, how we're trying to build a reputation of integrity to where people see us as a person of integrity, which means somebody who lives up to those moral standards and does their best to live up to all the moral standards that they've set in their lives. We talked about maintaining our positive character and how in order to truly maintain your positive character, you have to be able to maintain your thoughts, control your thoughts, and use those thoughts to guide you towards that positive character. How do you maintain your thoughts? How do you control your thoughts? By weighing those thoughts based on what's right and wrong. When you have an idea or you're faced with a decision, you have to make your choices based on, is it right, is it wrong? In order to determine whether it's right or wrong, you can tell, does it harm myself? Does it harm others? Does it harm the environment around me? Does it break any set rules? And you can use those guidelines to determine whether it's right or wrong. Using the character trait of optimism, thinking positively, will also help you to see your way through any tricky situations that might come up, because you'll be looking for solutions. You'll be looking for the ways to solve them. There's a lot of influences that come up in life, and mind you, I'm still reviewing the last chapter. There's a lot of influences that come up in life in the form of, media around us. There's influences all around us, and we've covered this. But sometimes we can get in situations where we get thrown what it referred to as a curveball or a potential pitfall, setbacks in life, where we've planned, set our mind in advance, and done everything to avoid these negative influences and to be prepared for them, but something still goes wrong. These things occur in life all the time. And in order to deal with these situations, they kind of test your resolve. But you have to have the right mindset. You have to also, remember, like we talked about, have positive thinking. And use that to get yourself out of those potentially negative situations. And over time, you'll be quicker at thinking on your feet in a positive manner, and it'll work out. Setting your mind in advance, we talked about that. And there's going to be times when you do make a mistake. And this chapter 4 is one of my most liked chapters in the Peaceful Solution, the chapter 4 of the character unit, because it talks about how to get out of or to recuperate from a potentially crazy situation where you've made a bad choice or made a mistake or just done something that you regret. And that's a real part of life. We make decisions, maybe they weren't the best, and if our head's screwed on straight, we sort of regret those decisions that we've made. So this chapter 4 that David went over last class shows you how to work on not beating yourself up over these mistakes or these negative choices that you make, but actually how to improve, how to learn from them and keep moving forward, how to use those mistakes that you may have made to help other people to make better decisions. And there's a quote that I always try to remember in chapter 4. Let me try to find it real quick. On page 89 at the bottom, and it shows a pig there wallowing in the mud. It says, "Don't wallow in the mud. Pick yourself up, excuse me, dust yourself off and get on the right track to a true moral character." Because there's going to be things that you do that will depress you and will get you down because you've made a bad decision if you have a conscience, and which everyone does. But they'll get you down if you're trying to follow the path of moral character. But you have to learn from those mistakes instead of falling into the trap of those mistakes. All right, let's go ahead and get into chapter 5 here. And the ripple effect, character, society, and the world. Now I want you to just pause for a second and take a look at how we've built. Because learning to be teachers, this is very important. You have to build on what you've learned. When you're teaching. Your students are building on what they have learned. When we began this book, we were excuse me, air is really dry out here. I'm like choking on my own breath. But we introduced the concept of character. What character is, where it comes from, and then we started introducing how to apply that whole concept into our lives. What is it made of? Well, you have traits, positive and negative traits. How can you use those traits? What are the things that might combat that positivity, negative influences, etc.? And now we're getting to the point to where we're talking about how does our own behavior affect everybody around us, which, if you remember, is the goal of becoming a positive person. That way you can spread that positivity to others, be it through teaching, through a positive example, through the skills that you've acquired so that you can help others physically with tasks that they need done, etc. But that all comes through becoming a positive person yourself. You've probably heard several times in the Peaceful Solution, if you've been following us, that in order to properly lead other people, you have to first understand how to lead yourself. And that's what this is all about. And that's what this chapter will expound on. Because now that you've learned how to start practicing positive character yourself, then you get to share it with other people as a leader. And we'll also see how negative character has a very huge ripple effect on other people, and in fact on the whole world. So we're going to talk about how both positive and negative character traits affect not only the individual, and I'm on Lesson Plan 5C here, the Grade Tab page, Step 2, but also society and the world. So the character traits that you have, the things that you do, don't just affect yourself, they affect everybody around you, and as a result, the effects ripple outward and affect everybody. So there's a question posed here. Question A, and it says, has anyone ever dropped a pebble into a calm pool of water? Now I want everybody here to imagine that. What occurs when you have a calm, nice pool of water? Definitely not today. I mean, it's windy, like extremely windy. But a calm pool of water, and then you drop a pebble into it. What occurs? You have those ripples, calm ripples that go outward. And as time progresses and as the ripples progress, they get slightly bigger, wider, a lot wider, and they ripple outward. It defines it here as a series of concentric circles, each one larger than the next. And that's referred to as a ripple effect. And the same way in life, when we make a decision, one small decision can affect our immediate circle around us, and then each one of those people have a circle around them, and it affects them, and it affects larger and more people. And depending on how powerful that decision was, it can affect a huge swath of people and property and land and all kinds of things. So that's why we have to be careful to be making the best decisions possible. Our lives are interdependent upon each other. We rely upon each other and affect one another in both positive and negative ways. So a lot of times it's difficult for some people, not for everybody, but for some people, to realize that everybody around them it's an interconnected network of people. And we literally depend on one another for survival. You know, just imagine if you had no way to ask anybody for anything, or to communicate with anybody for anything. You might survive, but it would be a lot more difficult because we depend on each other in order to make a nicely functioning community. Now that dependence on each other also comes with a lot of complications. Because everybody has different personalities, everybody has different things that they know how to do, different characters, and that's when things can get tricky if we're not trained how to deal with it properly. So here's a following scenario, and I want all of you to close your eyes, just like you would ask your students to close your eyes. But I want all of you to close your eyes and imagine that all of you are celebrating the start of summer vacation. If you have to go back to your summer break years, then do that. Just don't get too crazy. Celebrating the start of summer vacation, you're smiling, laughing, and talking excitedly about the high points of your school year. Suddenly, one of your classmates bursts through the door. She's sobbing and crying hysterically. The people who are closest to her stop laughing and turn to her to inquire why she's crying. Soon others notice that their friends are no longer smiling and laughing, so they stop laughing and walk over to inquire what's going on. Before long, the entire class has stopped celebrating. Everyone is now focused on the classmate who is sobbing. A hush has fallen over the room that was only recently filled with the sounds of laughter and joy. Now there is only the sound of your classmate sobbing. It's a pretty interesting scenario there. Because what was once filled with laughter, excitement, plans for summer break, etc., what occurred during the year, and how quickly it can change. And obviously everybody cares about that friend because they were concerned enough to pause and see to the need of that person. But it quickly changed because of one person's input. Now this is only one example, and there's many reasons that person could have been sobbing. A parent could have just died, a horrible situation could have just occurred, a family tragedy, etc. This is only one example of how a person's behavior can affect others. And there's a lot more extreme examples and a lot more simple examples, but one person's behavior has the potential to affect so many people. And realizing that you are important can help you to see that. Having that value for yourself and realizing that you do have value personally can help you to realize that, hey, the decisions I make do have an impact on people. And that's one of the other reasons it's so important to have value in yourself, because it affects the way you treat others. Page 105, we have the introduction here. It says it's a sad thing and a sad time when we go to school and find war. And oftentimes that is what we find, sadly. All right, the introduction. Our character dictates our behavior and our actions. It's the foundation by which we interact with others, and thus makes it the most important thing that we can develop, being the foundation. For instance, your house. If you don't have a solid foundation for your house, or a level foundation for your house, the rest of your house is going to be as weak as that foundation. It's going to be as out of whack as that foundation. If you're building on a weak foundation, then one side of the house is going to be settling, and you're going to have cracks, you're going to have all kinds of problems. It's the same thing with us as human beings. Our character is the foundation of all of our behavior. And it determines the choices that we make. It determines whether we make choices that are advantageous or disadvantageous. So it's very important that it's our main focus to build that character, that foundation, to make it as strong as possible. There are very few activities that we do on a daily basis in which we are not directly interacting with someone. Now, this whole pandemic, the COVID pandemic that has pretty much affected every square inch of life over this planet, for people anyway, has really sort of woken a lot of people up to just how interdependent we are and just how much we need other people to survive comfortably. Because there's been a lot of isolation, there's been a lot of quarantine, there's been a lot of lockdowns and things like that, where people have to live, in their own homes and not really see anybody unless absolutely necessary. If there's a family, they're confined with themselves. And they get to, husbands and wives that never really had to live with each other or work with each other are now getting to see different characteristics of them that they never saw before or never really realized were such strong things before. And, siblings are starting to live with each other, and all these things are starting to occur, and it's a really extreme situation for some people. On the other side, some people are feeling the really strong effects of isolation because maybe there's only one or two people in that household. And they haven't experienced that before because they work with a lot of people. So they're feeling the stress of isolation and not being around people. So it's affected so many people in so many extreme ways. But that just goes to highlight this here. There's very few activities that we do on a daily basis in which we are not directly interacting with someone. Can you recall a day when you did not see or speak to anyone? Think about that. And I'm sure we have some, but they're interesting days. As human beings, we need to interact and associate with others. It's this need to belong that compels us to have friends and people we can interact with and feel accepted by. In the next unit that we're going to cover, the acceptance unit, it actually goes over the importance of friends. Because friends are important, and it's easy to dismiss that depending on what environment you're in or how stressful your environment is. And you sort of feel like, well, I need to just pull off to myself and become, a hermit and never ever see or talk to anybody. It would be a lot simpler, a lot easier. But in reality, that's setting yourself up for a lot of failure, potentially. If you don't have those positive friends to encourage you, Because there's times when we get in pretty low situations, and those friends will help to encourage us to do the right things. And sometimes a lot of minds are better than just one. So it is great to have positive friends. But the key word there is positive. The friends that you're around will definitely influence you in a lot of different ways. So positive is the key word there. It is this same need to belong that compels adults to marry, raise families, and allows people to form communities and neighborhoods. When a group of people live under a common body of laws and share common values and interests, they're called a society. So that's a society, and underline that there, you should, because it's the definition of a society. When a group of people live under a common body of laws, share common values and interests, they're called a society. And you have little communities who are, even more maybe a tight-knit society, small towns. You always hear about small towns and how tight-knit they are because everyone pretty much grew up together. They know each other. Old Uncle Joe, old Uncle Joe because he's lived on that side of the block for years. And everybody sort of knows each other. There's a community feel there to small towns. Larger cities sort of tend to lose that feeling. Not that there's anything wrong with either one. But that's just to show how societies can be very tight-knit. And they have common values in that community for the most part. And then you can scale up bigger. You have states, and maybe the United States, for instance, which has a more varied, but still some people would say a common set of rules, values, and interests. And that's the society of the United States of America. And then you can go globally, where the interests get more varied and more widened, but the earth, the world that we live in is a society of people who are trying to survive. And if you look at it that way, that can help you to realize that all lives, regardless of, what part of the globe that they're on, have value and should be treated with respect. In the same way character shapes an individual, it can also shape society, which in turn forms our nation. In essence, character can shape our world. A choice, a single choice, either positive or negative, starts with one person, but can affect not only that person, but also a family, society, and even the world. Think of this. I want everybody to think of this. You're working, or not you, somebody is working for a company. And maybe they're low on funds, so they decide that they're going to steal from their boss. Money or items or whatever. They decide they're going to steal from their boss. And for whatever reason. And they steal from their boss. Think of how the potential ripple effect that could have. Now, some people might say, well, the boss is the head of the company. He has a lot of money. Stealing from him wouldn't make that much of a difference. And maybe that wouldn't be too inaccurate, stealing a little bit of money compared to a large scale, but it's still stealing. And it's a negative thing. But let's say they stole a significant amount of money from the boss that really hurt the boss and hurt the company. Think of the ripple effect that could have. Or maybe they out of spite, damaged some really expensive equipment that belonged to the company that had to be paid for. Or nonetheless put a real impact on the boss and his company. As a result, the boss may not be able to pay his employees, and now a bunch of people potentially get laid off or don't have as much money. They have families. Now their families suffer. If those families aren't moral, that might drive them to steal. And now you have other businesses in the community getting hurt. Other neighbors, other families. From one person trying to spite his boss. Or from one person stealing or doing something dishonest. And that could scale a lot larger and a lot larger, just given time to think about it. So the choices made by one person can ripple widely. A parent, for instance, is another very interesting angle to look at. Because what does a parent do? They raise children. So the choices of that one parent have a lot to do with how those children turn out. And whoever is in the lives of those children turn out. Their friends, their other family members, etc. The children that they raise. And something that one person did, can last generations long as a ripple effect. So there's so many different ways that one person's decision can ripple outwards. And remember that you are one person. And the decisions you make have the potential to ripple outwards, so try to make the best decisions possible. We live in a society where our need to belong makes us interdependent on one another. And I'm going to break that word down just a little bit more than we have. The word dependent. When someone is dependent on somebody or something, they need that other thing to perform a certain task or to survive, etc. When you're independent, it means you don't need that thing, that person, or that thing to survive. When you're interdependent, however, that means everybody involved is dependent on each other for survival. That's what a society is. Bob's grocery store has the milk, Mary's bakery has the bread, and Susie's chicken farm has the eggs, and they depend on each other to be able to provide breakfast for their family, right? So that's just a small example of how a society is interconnected, interdependent. And of course you have your grocery stores, your convenience stores, your gas stations, your et cetera, different businesses that provide different services, and we all depend on each other for things to run smoothly. That's a healthy running community. Because we rely on and need each other, our behaviors affect one another in both positive and negative ways. Our ability to affect each other is like a stone dropped into a pond, causing one ripple after the next, each one larger than the one before. And then we get into talking about the ripple effect and exactly what it is and how it can affect society. On page 106, we talk about the ripple effect. Two of the most devastating results of negative character in our society and our world are violence and crime. Now, I think an interesting thing to note is that how we're talking about the negative first here. Why? Because it's really, really easy to see. If society was altogether positive, and there was no negativity going on, or very little negativity, it would be easier to see the positive. But the sad reality of society is that there's so much negativity going on that it's the most apparent. And that makes it easy to see just how things can ripple outward. So let's talk about this negativity here. We have violence and crime. The ripple effects from violence and crime have an impact on everyone. When a dishonest person steals someone's possessions, the crime of theft does not stop with the victim. The victim will most likely become afraid and overprotective of her other belongings. This fear and distrust will ripple outward to her friends, their families, and to her neighborhood. Just like we talked about the person who steals from the business. It ripples outwards. For example, if your bike was stolen from your front yard, you would surely tell your parents. Your parents would call their friends who live in the vicinity and would let them know they should safeguard their possessions. You would also tell your friends, who would begin to be more careful about their belongings. As more and more people become aware of this crime, greater precautions will be taken, such as buying bike chains and other security measures. Measures could even be taken to establish neighborhood watch organizations so that neighbors could watch out for the homes of others while they're away. Now think of this real quick. The whole business of security systems, locks, etc., is a result of dishonesty. You know, if everybody was honest and didn't steal or didn't meddle with things that they didn't have the right to, there would be no need to lock our doors, no need to lock your possessions, and things like that. So that just goes to show just how much of a ripple effect these things that people do have on society, to where millions of dollars are spent on security systems just to keep things safe from these potential dishonest people. Every school day, page 107, more than 150,000 students stay home from school because they are afraid of being stabbed, shot, or beaten. Now, I see a lot of parents here, but I also see students here. And I'm sure there's a lot of students watching, as well as a lot of parents. Why do parents send their children to school? Because the education that they get there is what they need to become a functional member of society. They trust that school environment to be able to provide their children with the knowledge to be able to survive in society. Not to be shot, not to be stabbed, not to be beaten, not to be bullied, not to be made fun of. But that's what a lot of children go through in school. And we've all seen it. As students, I'm sure we've experienced it. And as adults, I'm sure you can look back and see where you've experienced it. And it's not a great thing to be wanting to go to school and be the best you can be as far as education, but be afraid to make progress because other kids are going to make fun of you. Or be afraid to speak your mind because maybe somebody's going to think you're stupid or dumb. Or to be afraid to go to school because somebody's going to bully you because you have money for lunch. These are the crazy things that students have to deal with every single day. Or because of some gang activity or some other sort of violence that's going on at the school, drug activity, etc. And this is not an uncommon thing. And as a result, there's some crazy situations that go on in these schools, or abuse, or other things that could go on. Let's read the following articles on crime and the effects on the community. School safety. April 20th, 1999, marked a day that went down, and I'm sure a lot of you know where this is going. If you were, young in the 2000s years or grew up watching the news and things. One of the worst school shootings in the United States, according to the news reports, and there's been several since then. You've had the Sandy Hook one that was very popular for a while, but this one in particular is the Columbine school shooting. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold shot and killed 12 students, 1 teacher, and wounded 23 others before committing suicide at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado. Since this tragic event, the issue of school safety has been a hot topic. There are many school officials, lawmakers, and community members who are now demanding that metal detectors, security guards, and police patrols become a normal part of daily school routines, which in many places they have. In fact, there was a huge issue and debate not too long ago, just a few years ago. It was the first or second year of the Trump administration, where there was a huge debate on whether we should allow teachers and school officials to carry guns, open carry, in school. And a debate on whether that would be helpful or harmful, etc. And there was a lot of different views and opinions on that as a result of school violence, school shootings, or an active shooter in school. And understand that none of this discussion would even be necessary if these people were trained in positive character and practiced the things that they were taught. Many others, however, feel that the answer to school safety is to provide programs in schools and the community about anger management and finding peaceful solutions to deal with conflicts, which in reality is the foundation. That should be the first part. Of course, there's preventative measures that should be taken for, people who haven't been taught. However, in order to even prevent that further up down the line, they have to be taught. They have to be taught to begin with. If we're not teaching our students and our society how to have a positive character, you're going to be fighting a rotating door vicious cycle of trying to prevent people who are trained to be killers. So the main issue that needs to be dealt with is the education. Teaching them how to solve their problems in a peaceful manner, how to deal with the stressful situations in life so they don't escalate to that point, while also dealing with the preventative measures. Regardless of what methods are used to make schools safer for the future, the lives that were lost on that day can never be restored. And a school, its families, the community, and a nation will never be the same. So that's just in schools right there. But there's crime all over society coming from all different angles. Now here's another interesting, very interesting angle here. And this was coming around a time when rock music was very popular in the United States with the younger generation. So there was a lot of fire being aimed at rock music. But a lot of times it's whatever music is popular at the time that gets that, a lot of criticism aimed at it. Not that any genre of music is positive or negative per se, but just keep that in mind while you're reading this. According to public news reports, a 17-year-old boy stabbed a 14-year-old girl in the neck after listening to and watching a music video by a popular self-possessed satanic rock star. Although the girl survived the attack, the boy could face up to 99 years in prison for injury to a minor. Community members in Fort Worth and the neighboring city of Arlington have linked the attack to the boy's obsession with satanic rock music. In response to the case, parents are being urged to pay close attention to what their children are listening to. Also, the local Crime Prevention Resource Center has created a seminar to educate school officials, parents, and law officials about the violence and crime that can result from the influence of music. Now think about that real quick. One of the most effective ways to teach somebody something is by putting it in song. ABCs is a prime example of that. Everybody is probably now thinking of the ABC song and how that goes. So that just goes to show, I see some people bobbing their head to the ABC melody. I like it. But in any case, that just goes to show how well music puts things in your mind and helps you to learn them. A lot of times people listen to music without even really paying too close attention to the lyrics. But nonetheless, those lyrics are going to our mind with the rhythm, with the beat, with the amazing melody, and putting things, influencing our mind to do things, whether the music is telling us to do something positive or negative. Now, depending on the mind that you have, sure, you can resist some of those influences, but if you're constantly bombarding your mind with those negative influences, you're training your mind to do negativity. And you're making it harder and harder on yourself to resist those influences. Why put yourself in that situation? So, but like I said, this is talking about rock music specifically, but there's many different kinds of music. Think about the music that you grew up listening to, whether it was rock, hip-hop, even R&B, and some of the more what people would consider easier listening music, etc. And think of the actual lyrics, the words that were in them. Some of the words that I was familiar with growing up, I mean, if you did some of the things in those songs, you'd be going to prison for quite a long time. Some of those you'd be being put in prison for sexual assault. Some of them you'd be put in prison for murder. You know, some others of them had positive lyrics, but depending on what you are listening to and what you're allowing yourself to be influenced by, it's shaping the way your mind works. It's shaping your thought process. And it's making it seem like a normal, positive thing to do. So realize that when you're influencing yourself with media and with music, and the potential that it has to lead you or guide you towards doing potentially unwanted things. Now that was a singer. Now, I don't know how many of you are singers in this audience or influencers in this audience. Because, you know, that's a very, very big thing right now to be, you know, because there's many, many influencers. Online particularly, you know, you have YouTubers, you have all these different people. And realize as an influencer, that's literally your name. You are an influencer. Your responsibility, your job even, if you're making financial gain from it, is to influence people. So how are you influencing those people? You should be trying to influence those people in a way that builds their positivity, that builds their lives, that helps them out with life. A lot of times your audience is going to be very young children who are very impressionable, easily influenced. So keep in mind that what you're doing is you have a very huge ripple effect if you have, you know, thousands of followers, millions of followers. Those are people that literally take time out of their day, out of their life, and dedicate a little bit of that time to you, to listen to whatever you have to say, whatever you're doing at the moment, whatever your vlog is about, whatever your video is about, whatever you're doing. They dedicate some of their time to you. And it would be failing those people, young children, older people alike, it would be failing those people to be influencing them negatively. Or doing something that you know probably isn't the best idea. Now, a lot of times those crazy things is what gets you views. So, you know, it's an interesting battle to sort of fight. Am I interested in throwing my character out the window for views? Or for listens or whatever it might be? And just doing something outlandish and hilarious and funny, whether it's positive or negative? Or am I actually interested in helping the people that are following me? You know, and your positive character, your integrity should tell you to be, and there's nothing wrong with doing things that are funny or fun, but do them in a positive way that actually helps the people watching you build a better life as an influencer. Chew on this on page 108. Dishonesty results in crimes such as robberies, burglaries, and thefts. When a community is bombarded with these types of crimes, no one's property is safe. Honest, hardworking people suffer when possessions such as cars, money, and other items, are stolen. The cost of living increases because businesses spend thousands of dollars installing security systems such as burglar alarms, cameras, and security guards to protect their property. Because of this, the cost of merchandise goes up. Those $90 sneakers might only cost you $50 if it wasn't for shoplifters. And that's a very, very interesting thing to think about because, and I haven't looked at any updated statistics as of this year, but it was 10 cents on every dollar was being added to every item in your common grocery stores because of shoplifting. 10 cents on every dollar. That's pretty extreme. A lack of respect in the octagon on the bottom left for life and a lack of compassion will result in crimes such as child abuse and murder. When these crimes are rampant in society, there is fear and mistrust. Taxpayers like your parents, and one day you, will pay higher taxes for policemen, prosecutors, public defenders, and jails. In addition to this, children who are abused frequently grow up and, without proper education to stop the cycle, abuse their own children. Now, I want everybody to pause for a minute and think about that. Remember I was talking about parents and just the amount of ripple effectiveness that they have on the society around them and after them. Because what that parent does has such a strong effect on the children. Are you an abusive parent who, talks down to your children and screams and yells and, makes the family environment a very difficult place to live in? You can expect that to be carried down through your children. Maybe not because they want to, but because that's what they know. That's how they were raised. Maybe not because they want to, but because they don't know how to break out of that cycle. They might even think it's right. And over time, causing harm to numerous generations afterwards. The diamond there. In the United States, more people die as a result of crime than natural disasters. More people die as a result of crime than natural disasters. Another thing to pay close attention to is just overall carelessness. For instance, when you're driving on the road, and I remember several times when we were going into courthouses, and these are, there's people who were just being careless, texting while driving, or not paying attention on the road, or going as far as substance abuse while driving, drinking while driving, driving while intoxicated. And think of the ripple effect that has. If you cause a serious accident, you could be ruining a whole bunch of families' lives. They could be losing children, innocent victims who had nothing to do with the situation except that they were crushed by a car that you were driving, or, ran off the road or anything like that because of your carelessness. Has a huge ripple effect. So that's another thing to look at as well. You might not have actively sought out to go and commit a crime, but just by not being careful and stopping and thinking about what you're doing, you can cause all kinds of people damage. Okay, let's go back to the lesson plan here to make sure we're not missing anything, and it doesn't look like we are. But remember that one person's behavior has the ability to affect a lot of people around you. And it's great to stress that when you're teaching. So let's talk about the Hatfields and McCoys on page 109. Violence leads to violence. Have you ever heard the saying, violence only leads to more violence? Well, unless it's stopped through correct education, it is true. And the vicious cycle that we talked about, where you might have abusive parents, and then the children grow up to be abusive as well, that can be stopped through education as well. Or through a child having the, whether in the situation or outside of the situation, being able to say, this is not right, and I refuse to do this to my children. Or I refuse to continue this cycle. And then putting forth the effort, the work, which it is a lot of effort and a lot of work to break that cycle, to make sure that they don't do that for future generations. Throughout history, there have been many examples of how hate results in violence and ripples outward from one or two aggressive individuals to their respective families, neighbors, and communities. One infamous case involves two families, the Hatfields and the McCoys. How many of you have heard of the Hatfields and McCoys? Okay, wonderful. According to a written history of the event in the late 1800s, a feud started because a McCoy accused a Hatfield of stealing his pig. Although the case was taken to court and the charges were dropped, The hatred between the two families could not be so easily dismissed. Now, unless you live in a farming community, this might not seem so critical to you. But I mean, we're talking about livelihoods here. So you can see how it could really have an effect. But we've seen on the news, if you just look at some headlines where people get in fights over fried chicken. I wanted baked chicken, you got fried chicken, and people have been murdered, shot in the face over fried chicken. It's ridiculous. It gets ridiculous. But without the proper training, the proper education, and the use of self-control, these disagreements can occur and can cause crazy situations. And we're going to talk about a crazy situation here. The hatred and vengeance between these two families soon erupted into violence. The violence rippled outwards to other members of their families and friends. This infamous feud resulted in 13 people murdered, as well as several others who were imprisoned or executed. Remember, this all started over a pig. At its peak, this feud caused tensions and divisions between two neighboring states. It only ended when the Supreme Court intervened around the turn of the century. So, a dispute over a pig rippled outward and affected so many people and had such an impact that two states were involved and the Supreme Court had to be involved, had to intervene. The ripple effect of violence can be seen not only between families and states, but also between nations. Hate, violence, and retaliation between nations often result in war and the killing of innocent men, women, and children. You can see this in business too. Competition within business, for instance. And that's something that I suppose is to be expected. But I've heard a lot of times more recently that collaboration is the new competition. And I mean, that phrase is a little bit interesting because it's not like the collaboration is turning into competition, but that it's taking the place of competition and that it actually will bring more business that way. If one business is able to say, hey, we actually don't have this part or we don't sell this, but I recommend that you go to this business because they do sell it, that's collaboration. And it's not a competition at that point. And, there's many different ways this could be done. They could collaborate together on certain projects and, bring a lot more revenue and a lot more business to the community by having the attitude of collaboration rather than competition. But I'm sure many of you have seen and have experienced or witnessed how when businesses get into competition, it can be the downfall of both of those businesses depending on how far they push it. Or one business can really boom and the other business can completely fail. But oftentimes it ends in a disaster depending on how big or how small. Then we have the Rodney King case, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. Rodney King, because that was all over the news and there were riots and protests. And since then, there's been several other incidents that we'll discuss after we read this Rodney King case, but which has brought up a lot of racial issues and things in the United States and the country, and had some serious impact last year on the way things were run, even in the midst of a pandemic. But in 1991, the Rodney King brutality case. According to news reports on March 1991, and I'm sure some of y'all have seen this footage too, Rodney King, a black motorist of Los Angeles, was driving his car when he violated a traffic law. Police signaled for him to pull over. Instead of pulling over, Mr. King thought he would lose the police by driving at speeds of up to 100 miles an hour. When he finally stopped and got out of his car, 4 white police officers surrounded him and beat him extensively. He suffered damages to the kidneys, skull, and brain. Unaware that someone had videotaped the entire incident, the 4 police officers filed a report that stated that Mr. King resisted arrest. However, the videotape showed that Mr. King stepped out of his car with his hands up, indicating that he was giving up. The videotape clearly showed that he did not attempt to resist arrest, and several subsequent videotapes over the years, we're in 2021 now. This was 1991. So just look at the time here, and these things are still occurring. And now that we have a lot more cell phone cameras and everybody's hands in pockets, the videos are simply just becoming more readily available. Not that things are becoming more and more rampant per se, although they probably are as well, but more people are able to see them, videotape them, and report them to the public. So it's becoming more, people are becoming more aware of it, or awareness is being built of it. So Mr. King's rights were violated. The police officers were arrested for violently beating him. However, the jury found them not guilty. The black population of Los Angeles felt that the verdict was based on prejudice. Within hours after the policemen were found not guilty, the black population of Los Angeles began to riot. This riot left more than 2,000 injured, 55 people dead, and over $1 million worth of damage to downtown Los Angeles from fires and looting. Now, there's a lot of different debates and discussions that we could get into on the subject of racial inequality. But something that you have to remember in all of this is that, and there's also the debate of Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter, which is a very interesting discussion to look at. And you don't want to get so caught up in debate that you actually forget the whole purpose for everything, because people have value. And when anybody is treated with less value than somebody else, whether it's because of race, because of class, because of religion, because of ethnicity, gender, etc., that's when problems arise. That's when problems arise. The only way to solve these problems is for everybody to accept and realize that everybody is valuable, just as valuable, and have the potential to contribute to society, and should be treated that way. Now, on the topic of All Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter, there's this huge debate here, and people on both sides of what shouldn't be an argument but is an argument getting up in arms. All lives matter. All lives matter. Why are you saying that only Black Lives Matter? And then the Black Lives Matter people are saying, well, this is such an important topic that the Black lives should be responded to. It's okay. It's not something worth getting all up in arms over. But at the time, there was incidents that were occurring with a lot of black people in the United States of America and across the world. So yes, it was the time for black people to say, hey, listen to us, we have an issue here. And that shouldn't be dismissed. And thus arose the Black Lives Matter argument. So you have to be able to look at both sides rationally here and be able to see, well, this is something that a look needs to be taken at. People have been oppressed for so long, and that's only going to last for a while before something occurs because of it. Now, so being able to look at it with a clear head and with a positive mind, using positive character traits, you can see both sides and both angles of the argument and where they come from, and you can find the solution, which the solution would be everybody deserves to be treated with respect and value. Yes, black people deserve to be treated with respect. So do white people, so do Asians, so do everybody else. And the whole idea of race is sort of an interesting construct as well. Because if you really look at it, we're all human beings. We're all human beings. We all have hands, fingers, toes, and we all deserve to be treated with respect regardless of what language we speak, etc., etc., etc. So, but you can see just how much uprising that can bring to people over that one matter itself, and the ripple effect that it had on the entire nation because of the acts of a few, or the attitudes of a few, or it might even be safe to say the attitudes of many, depending on where they were raised and their upbringing. Some people were raised to have hatred against a certain group of people, be it black people, be it people from a certain class. When I say class, I mean, financial class or education class, etc. People are taught to hate those people or to look down on them, and that's not right either. And sometimes we have to even look at ourselves and see, do we harbor any of these things without realizing it? Do we look down on a certain group of people because of their skin color without realizing it? I've seen the most anti-racist people who say they're not racist do some things that most people would classify as very racist. And they don't even realize that they're doing it is the thing. So look at ourselves, look internally and realize, am I basing my decisions based on something that I was brought up on that has no sense or no foundation in morality? Am I doing it just because that's what my parents did, or because of the way I was raised, or because of some construct I have in my mind that's not based on morality? And when you're able to examine yourself that way, you can start to make better decisions. So self-examination is very important, like we talked about in the previous chapter. Now, Indian violence. This was in the United States. Now we're talking about India here. According to news reports on February 20th, 2002, violence between Hindus and Muslims sweeping the western Indian state of Gujarat has left more than 40 dead, and the toll is expected to rise. In the state's largest city, Ahmedabad, 22 Muslims were burnt alive as Hindu mobs went on the rampage to avenge a train attack on Wednesday, blamed on Muslims, which left 598 mostly Hindu activists dead. "There's a fire inside us," they said. "Our blood is boiling," said Mangal Ben, a Hindu resident of Ahmedabad. "What is the fault of those children who died?" "There's a volcano of anger." "Naturally," she told Reuters. There are widespread fears that the latest clashes could trigger a repeat of the nationwide communal violence that followed the destruction of the mosque, and that's from BBC. Now, think about that. You have people who lost their entire family, who lost their children. That is going to spark some extreme emotions of anger, potentially hatred, and might even lead to violence, which it did. And, what can you expect when there's violence imposed on some other people and their entire families are ravished? In society today, where people aren't trained in positive character, that's what you will expect. You expect retaliation, you expect continual violence between those people. Now, something here to look at is this was a fairly religious battle, too, a fairly religious war. And, a lot of times you see this sort of extremism in some of these religions where their beliefs, they use their beliefs as a reason to cause destruction or violence. And that's another thing to really think about, and if you look at a lot of these religions, they're probably based in morality as well. And that very same religion probably teaches them not to do the very things that they're doing with violence, if you look at the foundation of these religions. So a lot of times what they're doing is on some extreme level. So if you're a part of a religion, and you're practicing something and you realize, hey, such and such makes me want to go kill all of these people. Well, does my religion actually teach not to kill people? It does. So then there's your line that you draw. So that's something else to think about. Religion is not an excuse to cause harm to other people. And then again, like the peaceful solution is suitable for all religions, because everybody can agree that life is valuable and deserves to be treated with respect. September 11th, 2001, and this is the last one we're going to cover here today, before we get into the song that maybe y'all get to sing next class. September the 11th, 2001, and this was an extreme moment in the United States history that has shaped a lot of security measures and things like that in the United States. Started off as a bright, beautiful summer morning. Most people who worked at the World Trade Centers in New York City and the Pentagon in Washington went to work as usual, expecting nothing more than their normal routines for that day. However, according to the news reports, that normalcy ended by 8:45 a.m. when American Airlines Flight 11, the first of the planes hijacked by terrorists, crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. By 9:03, United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower. And by 9:40 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon. Due to terrorist attacks, 9/11 became a day of horror and destruction that left thousands of people dead or seriously injured. And I'm sure many of you know people who actually worked in that building or were scheduled to work in that building, and the effects that it had on them and their family. The lives of their family and friends will never be the same. In fact, the entire nation will never be the same. All air travel in and out of the U.S. was suspended for several days. Several buildings within a close proximity of the trade towers also collapsed. Businesses suffered, the stock market closed, and the economy was badly shaken. 9/11 became known as the day that changed America. Within 3 months after the attack, President Bush retaliated against the terrorists by declaring war on terrorism. This war has claimed the lives of hundreds of innocent Afghanistan civilians and of American servicemen. The president has also declared that in an effort to eradicate all terrorists, the war on terrorism will not end soon and has not ended. This was in 2001. It's now 2021. It will spread to any nation that harbors terrorists and supports their activities. Now, something I want to point out about this article, because we're talking about a ripple effect here. After this, and before this too, but especially after this, there was sort of a stigma that was placed on a certain religion. A certain religion. And we'll get back into religion here, because remember, we don't discriminate based on religion. But when somebody was classified as a Middle Eastern person because of either the way they looked or their religion, a lot of times there was some real apprehension among American people because of a stigma that was now placed in their mind because of an event that took place. You know, now whether or not the entire Muslim religion or the entire Middle Eastern area was to blame for that, many people have different decisions or different opinions on. But every Muslim person was not responsible for that incident. But now when, you know, some people see a Muslim person, they immediately think terrorist. And that's not fair to that religion. That's not fair to that group of people by any means. But that just goes to show how the acts of one or a few can affect so many different ways of life on such a large scale and can cause so many issues when the things that are done are negative. On the other hand, they can cause a lot of positive issues when the things that are done are positive. And you can see throughout history a lot of positive things that were done that caused a lot of positivity. But it's easiest to see in society today, it's easiest to see the impact of the ripple effect because of all the negative things that are going on in society. So, always remember that when you're going through your daily interactions with others, the things that you do, even the smallest things that you do, have the potential to affect everybody around you. And try to be doing things in a positive way. We got a couple more minutes, so we're going to go ahead and go over this song. I'm not going to sing it. If any of y'all want to sing it at home, sing along, play the CD or the tape, feel free. Choose great character today. Stop the war, find the peaceful way. Using guns and knives to kill, it causes pain and blood to spill. War causes harm, it makes you cry, and causes your best friends to die. I do not want to see you fight, because I know it is not right. War is filled with hatred for all. No one cares who is killed or mauled. War brings death and shame, so stop the fighting, we're all to blame. Choose to start moral character today and live your life in a peaceful way. So, wonderful. Yeah, that's a really great song. So, by choosing that great character, or that positive character, in your life, remember there can be a war going on in your own head too. That war between positive and negative, or as, you know, a lot of the old Native Americans called it, the two wolves in your mind. You know, which one you feed is the one that's going to survive. But it's the same thing. If you're fighting that war in your mind and you're not allowing the positivity to win, you're going to end up causing a negative ripple effect for the people around you. But also this physical war and violence that can occur between siblings, between family members, between families, between communities, also causes a negative ripple effect and can ripple outwards. So that's a great stopping point, and we're going to pick up in the next class on page 113, which the next class will be on the coming Sunday, which will be, let me just check the date here so I'm not wrong. The 21st, is that right? Yes, the 21st, at 5:30 p.m. Central Time. Now, everyone don't forget to bring your books, and that will probably be the last class for a while, meaning we're going to take a break before we pick up, and you'll hear the dates and things like that in the next class. But everybody, I hope you have a wonderful week. I hope you apply the things that you've learned, and I hope they help you out. Everybody have a wonderful.